Thinking is contagious. I'm going to do this program. I'm going to do quite a bit of reading because I think there's an article here that really warrants a lot of verbatim, word for word. So my age is showing. Put on my reading glasses. Okay, it's an article which appears in the New Yorker magazine, written by Mr. Isaac Chotiner, and September 20th, 2020, today. And it's an interview with a never Trumper. Full disclosure, she did work for Senator Jesse Helms. He has his baggage, but the article goes into some of that detail. Again, I'm going to read. On Monday, Danielle Pletka, a senior fellow at the American Institute, published an op-ed in the Washington Post titled, "I Never Considered Voting for Trump in 2016. I may be forced to vote for him this year," she says. Pletka, who previously served as a staff member at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee working for Senator Jesse Helms, has been a very harsh critic of Donald Trump since the 2016 Republican primaries, declaring herself in another Washington Post op-ed both a never Trumper and a never Hillary. In her latest column, Pletka expresses her contempt for Trump and says that she fears his erratic, personality-driven decision-making, which we've commented on before. It's a theme in the Bolton book, and I concur that that is something that's got to be tempered. But she adds, and this is critical, listen carefully, "I fear the leftward lurch of the Democratic Party even more. On issues such as healthcare, immigration, and climate change, along with the self-growing self-censorship that guides many people's every utterance." She concludes, Trump, for all his flaws, could be all that stands between our imperfect democracy and the tyranny of the woke left. Let me repeat that. She concludes, Trump, for all his flaws, could be all that stands between our imperfect democracy and the tyranny of the woke left. The American democracy that has allowed us to live as the greatest nation in the world with the freedoms and the liberties, the comforts that all in this country have access to, she fears are a great risk in the hands of the left. Let's continue. The writer, the author, the interviewer, Mr. Chotiner, Mr. Chotiner asks her, "And you think Joe Biden is captaining the ship?" He says, "You mentioned Michelle Obama, and he obviously served the Obama administration and has a long history as a moderate Democrat." So he was asking about her interpretation of the far left versus Biden's centrist, conservative Democratic views. And this is a good insight into this Trojan horse theory that we floated in other programs, and other people have floated as well. Yes, he does have a long history. I wish, this is her quoted, "I wish I felt more confident that he would be the Joe Biden that I knew. And by that, I don't refer to the Joe Biden of the Obama administration, because I think he didn't play a terrific role in the areas that I focused on in foreign policy. The Joe Biden of the Senate, the Joe Biden who was a ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, who was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was a moderate. I don't think that he has much to do with that guy anymore. But I would say, more importantly, that the party left him behind, Biden, and he has had to race to catch up. And the argument that people make that, no, you are wrong because we chose him, I think is a little irrelevant." So This is much of what we've talked about in very recent programs, which is during the Democratic primaries, the guy had no traction. And the push by the Democrats was to get the far left, the progressives, into the White House. The results came back in, the Democratic primary results came back in, and it was obvious to the Democrats that there was no traction with their socialist agenda, with the Bernies, with the AOCs, with the Elizabeth Warrens, with this Mayor Pete. There was no traction. So they said, we've got to approach this a different way. Let's get a palatable, non-threatening, career swamp dweller. Let's use him as the Trojan horse. Let's use him as the key into the kingdom. We get someone that we can easily justify. If we pull out a miracle victory here, we can easily justify that he no longer can handle it, that he's not mentally competent, and we replace him. We give him a running mate that's going to check off the checklist, and we make it the best shot we can. I guarantee you that the people with the most political capital, the people with the best political futures on the Democratic side, said, we're not going to burn our chances going against Trump because it's an uphill battle. Much like McCain-Palin. They didn't want to go against Obama, uphill battle. So the Republicans said, let's take a flyer on this thing. Let's throw McCain. There's no future. He's old, and not because they didn't know he was ill at the time, but it's just that his career, he's on the downside of his career. Let's give him a check all the boxes, vice presidential candidate, vice presidential co-runner to run with him, and let's see what happens. So that's where that answer, I believe, takes us to that same thing. We continue going forward, and there's many claims. She, in her interviews, in the interview, Ms. Pletka infers of her views, those who she has offended with her views. You know, the retort is always racism, which we know. The liberals, when they're going to lose an argument, that's the first thing they do. They pull the race card. It's racism. The question they ask her is, when they call you a racist, is that about Trump? Is that about you're working for Jesse Helms? Because you work for Jesse Helms. What's the source of that? No, she says, it's about the fact that I will not sign on wholesale to the notions that are being propagated. Exactly. You disagree with the liberals, you're a racist. That's what that is. And that's the gospel. You write, this is a question asked of her, with Donald Trump, I know what I'm getting. He wears his sins on the outside. For good and ill, he runs his administration. I worry more about his incompetence and vacillation than I do about any dictatorial tendencies. And then you contrast with Biden, where you feel perhaps is not going to run his administration. In terms of competence or stability, are you saying that Trump offers something that Biden does not? Her answer. So that's a little bit of an invidious contrast, isn't it? I think that the problem that I perceive is that Biden is no longer really a steady hand. Now, is Donald Trump a steady hand? Well, let's put it this way. What you see is what you get with Trump. And that is critical and very important. To the attack, you know, the typical, oh, he tweets too much, he bothers me. This is a really good answer. And she says, he's dreadful. I mean, I don't accept the notion that some of my very dear friends suggest that you just have to put him on mute. No, there's a package there, sorry. And I don't know anybody who doesn't wish he would stop. But that being said, you really do have a window into who he is, how he thinks, and how things run. How our country runs. Okay, this is not only an unbelievably transparent administration in its way. This is an administration that has been constrained by how many investigations, how many court cases. This is, in my opinion, a brilliant observation. And obviously, the in the person doing the interview feels the same and feels he needs to diffuse this and feels he needs to go after this, because his question is, did you say transparent? Inferring that Trump is anything but. I said it has been transparent, this is her answer, in the sense that it has been constrained by how many court cases, how many investigations. Has there been a moment that Congress has not demanded documentation, called hearings, pulled people up, tried to extort, sometimes with great difficulty, from the administration? Great answer. Great answer. It is a transparent administration. Does it have warts? Absolutely. All administrations, all people have the warts. The interviewer says, what he's done to government, what we've seen go on in the intelligence agencies, what we've seen go on at the CDC, what we've seen go on in up and down every government agency, regardless of what your politics are, seems like a much graver threat to our institution than Joe Biden. Is your feeling that Trump has not done that as badly as I am saying? This is her answer. I think that many people fail to understand, what many people fail to understand is that the kind of predations that Trump has engaged in toward government agencies did not begin with Donald Trump. Do you remember the IRS investigation? Barack Obama's administration. The interviewer says, I think that the story is a little bit more complicated than that. What does that mean, a little more complicated than that? You don't have a retort to it? But she comes back real strong. She says, I think all these stories are a little more complicated than that. But when you come from the left, you tend to believe one side over the other. All I can tell you is that for those organizations that felt victimized by that, there was a government agency that was acting out its president's particular politics. The IRS was acting out President Obama's politics, his beliefs, his leanings, and where he thought. In 2017, the Treasury Department's Inspector General issued a report, a finding that the IRS had unlawfully flagged applications for tax-exempt status from conservative and progressive groups. This is a fact. This is not conjecture. Just like it's a fact that the Obama administration spied on the incoming Trump administration. A fact. Okay? You want to talk about corrupt administration? Biden will go down. Obama will go down as the most corrupt president in the history of this country. And Biden was at his right hand. The interviewer says, as the continuation to that IRS investigating the conservative groups, says, you don't think it's reached a new level in this administration? I do, she says. I think it has reached a new level, but I also think that there are safeguards against it. And I am far more comfortable with those safeguards than I am with the notion of a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic White House. An end to the filibuster and everything that it brings with it. And he says, and what do you think it might bring with it? I think it might usher in an era of irreversible drift in the direction that I think will be dangerous for this country. She says, don't forget, I may not like Donald Trump and I may not have voted for Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean that I don't think socialized medicine is a good idea. Fair enough, but socialized medicine is something that exists in almost every Western democracy. She says, your bias is showing. Of course it is. She says, sorry, I don't mean to pro or con statements, but what should happen with healthcare? This is the interviewer. I'm saying that some of the versions of socialized medicine exist in most European countries, and I think we should agree that they're all democracies. She says, I didn't suggest that the imposition of socialized medicine was somehow going to end our democracy. I merely said that it was going to usher in things that were irreversible and were not going to be good for our country. Okay. The interviewer asked the question, I fear that a Congress with Democrats controlling both houses, almost certainly ensured by a Biden victory in November, would begin an assault on the institution of government that preserves the nation's small d democracy. You then list things Congress would do and include national health care on the list. And her answer is because, again, I think that if you have a unitary executive and legislative branch with absolutely no safeguards other than the courts, that they will usher in, like did Obamacare, like they did in the Iran deal, things that are fundamentally anti-democratic, or at least in anti-democratic spirit, things that will be bad for our economy. And here, it really piggybacks on this importance of the Supreme Court with this statement that was made. The interviewer says, I can understand not liking the Iran deal. Not liking it. It was treasonous. Or Obamacare, but I'm confused about how they violate democratic spirit of the country. Are you kidding me? Whereas some of the things that we've read about Trump, about Ukraine, or about saying nice things about the people in Charlottesville, violated something we would hope is the spirit of our country. She says, I'm not a huge fan of whataboutisms, since they're easy to apply to almost everything. On the other hand, just because I didn't like the Democrats doing it doesn't mean I do like Trump doing it. And I don't like the President of the United States calling up his counterpart in Ukraine saying, hey, buddy, got some dirt on my opponent? You see one as worse. I see them all as dangerous. Both sides, both actions. So, and I agree with that. Obamacare and the interviewer, Obamacare and the Iran deal seem to me like fairly predictable policies of a Democratic administration, just like tax cuts and health care plan. Bush tried to get through were features of a Republican administration. What I was wondering is why these things were threats to democracy rather than just normal Democratic policies you don't like. Can you believe that question? Tax cuts under Bush is the same thing as the Iran deal. How can this guy like not be totally? I'm surprised that she was so civil in her response. And she says some of them are normal democratic policies, and that I don't like, that I think are dangerous for our country, and some of them I think are anti-democratic. When I say anti-democratic, I mean small d democracy. And I think racial prejudice is despicable. I think racial prejudice against black people, brown people, and white people is despicable. Listen to this. And I don't want to see a country in which people are told that they are guilty for being white. I don't want to see a country where people are told that they are guilty for being white. The interviewer, saying this now about racial issues, how do you feel in hindsight about your work with Senator Helms? Of course he had to bring that up. I did foreign policy for Senator Helms. I worked for the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. As far as I was concerned, in my work with Senator Helms, he never once uttered a racist statement, never betrayed a racial bias. To the contrary, and believed more than many of the people I worked with in human freedom, human rights, equality of opportunity. He fought for people who were disadvantaged. So there may have been a Jesse Helms one day who did things that were wrong. The interviewer says, you said that you were opposed to racism in all its forms. And I was just asking whether you had. And she interrupts and says, are you questioning whether I'm opposed to racism in all its forms? You know, it's a typical liberal attack, like cloaked attack, backhand slap. And she shut him down right away. Okay, the interviewer says, okay, so we're not going anywhere with that. Obviously, she shut him down. Do you think it's an unfair question? You've spoken out against Trump's racism, and you've spoken out against racism of all sorts. I thought it was fair to ask about Helms, that's all. I think it's fair, she says, I think it's fair to ask anything you'd like. I'm assuming that you think it's also fair that I won't answer certain questions, because you seem to want to trap me and discredit my views. So, again, the liberals, as always, you don't agree with them, it's not counter with facts, it's just discredit, okay? So, I'm just trying to leave this topic alone, if that's okay, Isaac. So, I think it's gotten a little long. I feel it was warranted. I think it's a really worthwhile read. And I think if you've got a few minutes, you can go through it yourself at your leisure. And I think it really encompasses where we are as a country at this point, where the liberals are trying to take this, and the overwhelming feeling that I have from speaking to people that both the left and the right are beginning to understand one thing very clearly. In an ideal world, would Donald Trump be our president? No. I wouldn't, he's not my top candidate for president. People who know me know where my thoughts have always been on Trump. But where we live and the choices that we have today to safeguard and make sure that America remains America, there's only one choice, people. And I speak out to those who are still supporting Biden and are pro-Biden, and I ask you to think about something other than this moment. Think about the future. Think about your kids. Think about your grandkids. They're being brainwashed. They're being indoctrinated. Remember the love letter to America by Yuri Bezmenov that we spoke about in a program earlier. That indoctrination phase to brainwash the kids and create a foundation on which to build a socialist agenda. Can't let it happen. Fight this. There's no conceivable way that allowing the left in through the Trojan horse that is Joe Biden is acceptable. And with the praying mantis that is Kamala Harris at his side, that as soon as his function is complete, he will be devoured, cast aside. And that's what you're facing. We all know this. We all need to fight this, and we all need to be pro-America. It's been a long program. I hope that you followed it till the end. I hope that you read this New Yorker article on your own. And I look forward to our next program, our next time together. Thank you. Have a good day.